how can I possibly begin to say thank you? These words from three poets who are dear friends, whose lives and whose writing I regard so highly, and the words coming up from the places they come up from. The strange thing about many things, one of the many strange things about thanks and the urge to give thanks is that the more appropriate it is, the less adequate is one's ability to do it. Thank you. And thank you to the donors and to everybody who's made this evening possible. I want to read a number of poems, and they'll cover a period of years. I mean, there won't be very many of them, and they'll all be quite short poems. And I want to sort of be turning into poems that focus in particular on the last book. I mean, through the selected poems, and then the new book, Present Company, and then ending with a number of unpublished, more recent poems. And the first poem I want to read is one that goes way back. I'm reading it partly because, in fact, in large part, because it's a poem that I remember. I almost never remember anything about readings. I don't remember the origins of poems, or very seldom. And I can remember lots of things around poems, around poetry readings, who was there, and lots of details about it, but I never remember the readings themselves. But this time, I remember that I stood here, well, I don't even want to tell you how many years ago, but it was in the 50s, and read this poem, which was a quite new poem then. It's called Odysseus, and it was dedicated to a dear friend of mine, George Kirstein. Always the setting forth was the same sea, same dangers waiting for him, as though he had got nowhere but older. Behind him on the receding shore, the identical reproaches, and somewhere out before him, the unraveling patience he was wedded to. There were the islands, each with its woman and twining welcome to be navigated, and one to call home. The knowledge of all that he betrayed grew till it was the same whether he stayed or went. Therefore he went. And what wonder if sometimes he could not remember which was the one who wished on his departure perils that he could never sail through, and which, improbable, remote, and true, was the one he kept sailing home to. I want to read a very short poem from later, some years later, that's a companion to one that Ed read, that little poem called The Room, about the bird in the corner trying to fly. This also is a winter poem. It's called Dusk in Winter. The sun sets in the cold without friends, without reproaches after all it has done for us. It goes down believing in nothing. When it is gone, I hear the stream running after it. It has brought its flute. It is a long way. This is the period of the book that Ed was talking about so eloquently and doing me such honor, the lice. In case any of the talk about the environment seems self-righteous, I mean this poem ought to offset that, I hope. It's called Fly. I have been cruel to a fat pigeon because he would not fly. All he wanted was to live like a friendly old man. He had let himself become a wreck, filthy and confiding, wild for his food, beating the cat off the garbage, ignoring his mate, perpetually snotty at the beak, smelling, waddling, having to be carried up the ladder at night, content. Fly, I said, throwing him into the air, but he would drop and run back, expecting to be fed. I said it again and again, throwing him up as he got worse. He let himself be picked up every time until I found him in the dovecote, dead of the needless efforts. So that is what I am. Pondering his eye that could not conceive that I was a creature to run from, I who have always believed too much in words. Ed and other friends have mentioned political activities and sympathies. I find politics extremely boring and would be delighted to have nothing whatever to do with it. But every so often it seems essential to speak for people who can't, and for myself too. The circumstances just require it. And at the beginning of the current conflict, which is glorified, if that's the word, by being called a war, the invasion of Iraq, I was in Washington with two friends, my publisher, Sam Hamill, a poet, and another friend, at the founding of the Poets Against the War movement. And I learned that poet friends of mine were already reading this poem in that same enterprise in different parts of the country. So I want to just read it as an example. I mean, they said, journalists would ask at that time, what do you think you can accomplish? Do you stop people who are picking up bodies after a terrible highway accident and ask them what they think they can accomplish? I mean, it's not the moment to ask those things. You do what you can. And I said, or did they say, you think you can change the minds of the administration? And I said, no, we have a president who I don't think was properly elected and who never reads anything. I mean, you can't change his mind. But I resent the attempt to frighten us. I mean, and I think it's important to show people that they don't have to be frightened unless there's a real reason to be frightened. I didn't believe there was one then, and I think there's plenty of reason to be frightened, but it wasn't the ones that we were being told about. Ash. The church in the forest was built of wood. The faithful carved their names by the doors, same names as ours. Soldiers burned it down. The next church where the first had stood was built of wood with charcoal floors. Names were written in black by the doors, same names as ours. Soldiers burned it down. We have a church where the others stood. It's made of ash, no roof, no doors. Nothing on earth says it's ours. The poems reflect, I think, over time, and I'm not going to read enough to try to prove a point, but a kind of pull that went on and has gone on for years between city and country, Europe and America, various poles of that kind. And obviously, in my case, the country won out, and I live sort of far out in the Pacific, and you can draw what conclusions you like about that. But it's a place I love being. But this is a poem that comes out of the same part of southwest France where I've had one little toehold since I was in my very early 20s, when I bought a ruined farmhouse for my last penny in the world, which was just over $1,000. And we still go back there. But it's a part of the world that's changed very much. But it was then part of the magic of the place was a sense of continuity of time, such as I know of nowhere else in the world, that goes all the way back to Neanderthal burials. I mean, that's antiquity, that's continuity, and it's different from when I first knew it. But this is a different poem from a different kind of poem from that part of the world, called September Plowing. For seasons, the walled meadow south of the house built of its stone grows up in shepherd's purse and thistles. The weeds share April as a secret. Finches disguised as summer earth click the drying seeds. Mice run over rags of parchment in August. The hare keeps looking up, remembering. A hidden joy fills the songs of the cicadas. 2 days' rain wakes the green in the pastures. Crows agree and hawks shriek with naked voices. On all sides the dark oak woods leap up and shine. The long stony meadow is plowed at last and lies all day bare. I consider life after life as treasures. Oh, it is the autumn light that brings everything back in one hand. The light again of beginnings, the amber appearing as amber. And a poem called Yesterday. My friend says, I was not a good son, you understand. I say, yes, I understand. He says, I did not go to see my parents very often, you know. And I say, yes, I know. Even when I was living in the same city, he says, maybe I would go there once a month or maybe even less. I say, oh, yes. He says, the last time I went to see my father, I say, the last time I saw my father, he says, the last time I saw my father, he was asking me about my life, how I was making out, and he went into the next room to get something to give me. Oh, I say, feeling again the cold of my father's hand the last time. He says, and my father turned in the doorway and saw me look at my wristwatch, and he said, you know, I would like you to stay and talk with me. Oh, yes, I say. But if you are busy, he said, I don't want you to feel that you have to just because I'm here. I say nothing. He says, my father said, maybe you have important work you are doing, or maybe you should be seeing somebody. I don't want to keep you. I look out the window. My friend is older than I am. He says, and I told my father it was so, and I got up and left him then, you know. Though there was nowhere I had to go, and nothing I had to do. There are great gaps of years in between, but they're all in much the order they were written. Late spring. Coming into the high room again after years, after oceans and shadows of hills and the sounds of lies, after losses and feet on stairs, after looking at mistakes and forgetting, turning there, thinking to find no one except those I knew, finally I saw you, sitting in white, already waiting. you of whom I had heard with my own ears since the beginning, for whom more than once I had opened the door, believing you were not far. Jerry read one of the two poems about Waverly Place, about the apartment, the sixth-floor walk-up. I'll read the other one. It's called 227 Waverly Place. I still have great fond feelings about it, but I don't go back because I understand that it's quite different. Also, the rent has gone up about 10 times, I think, since then. When I have left, I imagine they will repair the window onto the fire escape that looks north up the avenue, clear to Columbus Circle. Long I have known the lights of that valley at every hour through that unwashed pane, and have watched with no conclusion its river flowing toward me straight from the featureless distance, coming closer, darkening, swelling, growing distinct, speeding up as it passed below me toward the tunnel all that time, through all that time, taking itself through its sound, which became part of my own before long. The unrolling rumble, the iron solos, and the sirens all subsiding in the small hours, to voices echoing from the sidewalks, a rustling in the rushes along banks, and the loose glass vibrated like a remembering bee as the north wind slipped under the winter sill. At the small table by the window, until my right arm ached and stiffened, and I pushed the chair back against the bed and got up and went out into the other room that was filled with the east sky and the day replayed from the windows and roofs of the village. The room where friends came and we sat talking, and where we ate and lived together, while the blue paint flurried down from the ceiling, and we listened late with lights out to music, hearing the intercom from the hospital across the avenue through the Mozart. Dr. Kaplan wanted on the 10th floor, while reflections flowed backward on the walls. Waves in August. I think I'm losing one here. You'll be sorry to hear. No, it's all right. Waves in August. There's a war in the distance, with the distance growing smaller. The field glasses lying at hand are for keeping it far away. I thought I was getting better about that returning childish wish to be living somewhere else that I knew was impossible. And now I find myself wishing to be here, to be alive here. It is impossible enough to still be the wish of a child. In youth, I hid a boat under the bushes beside the water, knowing I would want it later and come back and would find it there. Someone else took it and left me instead, the sound of the water with its whisper of vertigo, terror, reassurance, an old, old sadness. It would seem we knew enough always about parting, but we have to go on learning as long as there is anything. Ed read one poem about Mowgli. This is another one. Mowgli chose me. I didn't choose Mowgli. He chose me when he was 6 weeks old, though. It could be like that. The poem is called The Name of the Air. It could be like that, then, the beloved old dog finding it harder and harder to breathe and understanding, but coming to ask whether there is something that can be done about it, coming again to ask, and then standing there without asking. There are a number of poems that I want to read from the new book. And the thing that they have in common is that they're all in the second person. They're all addressed to some fiction, some person, some personification, they began with, if you fly on an airplane, you get told, in the unlikely event of a water landing. I thought, now what is this unlikely event? And imagine the unlikely event. And I thought, well, they could all be unlikely events that I could imagine. But of course, when you start doing that becomes a kind of form, and they start becoming likely. So I gave that up. But to age. It is time to tell you what you may have guessed along the way without letting it deter you. Do you remember how once you liked to kneel looking out of the back window while your father was driving, and the thread then of pleasure as you watched the world appear on both sides and from under you coming together into place out of nowhere, growing steadily longer, and you would hum to it not from contentment but to keep time with no time, floating out along it, seeing the world grow smaller as it went from you, farther, becoming longer and longer, but still there? Well, it was not like that. But once it was out of sight, it was not anywhere. With the dreams of that night, whether remembered or not, and wherever it was arriving from on its way through you must have been growing shorter, even as you watched it appear and go. You still cannot say how. But you cannot even tell whether the subway coming in time out of the tunnel is emerging from the past or the future. To the consolations of philosophy. Thank you, but not just at the moment. I know you will say I've said that before. I know you have been there all along somewhere in another time zone. I studied once those beautiful instructions when I was young and far from here. They seemed distant then, they seem distant now from everything I remember. I hope they stayed with you when the noose started to tighten and you could say no more. And after wisdom and the days in iron, the eyes started from your head. I know the words must have been set down partly for yourself, unjustly condemned after a good life. I know the design of the world is beyond our comprehension. Thank you. But grief is selfish and in the present, when the stars do not seem to move. I was not listening. I know it is not sensible to expect fortune to grant her gifts forever. I know. This poem, next poem, is called To the Words, and it's dated September 17th, 2001. I have a private dislike of the phrase 9/11. It seems to me like a sort of television anchor nickname that demeans a terrible event that should have a name. And so I would not call it that. I'd call it anything else, the Towers Day or September, just the date, September 11th. To the words. When it happens, you are not there. Oh, you beyond numbers, beyond recollection, passed on from breath to breath, given again from day to day, from age to age, charged with knowledge, knowing nothing. Indifferent elders, indispensable and sleepless, keepers of our names before ever we came to be called by them. You that were formed to begin with, you that were cried out, you that were spoken to begin with, to say what could not be said. Ancient, precious, and helpless ones, say it. There are one or two from the book that are not in migration, but they're in present company. I want to read the one that's on your program, which is out of present company. To my brother. Our mother wrote to you before you were born, a note you might open at some later date in case she should not be there to tell you what was in her mind about wanting you when she had not seen you. That was before my time, and it never turned out like that. You never saw the letter, and she never saw you, who were perfect, they said, and dead within minutes. That far ahead of me, and always looking the other way, and I would be the one to open the letter after she was gone. And you had answered it without a word before I was there to find out about you, unseen elder, you perfect one, firstborn. One of the last poems in that collection is called To Myself. That's pretty close to where you want to end it, I think. But even when I forget you, I go on looking for you. I believe I would know you. I keep remembering you, sometimes long ago, but then other times I am sure you were here a moment before, and the air is still alive around where you were, and I think then I can recognize you who are always the same, who pretend to be time, but you are not time, and who speak in the words, but you are not what they say, you who are not lost when I do not find you. And then a few recent poems, more recent than any of those. This is one called Blueberries After Dark. So this is the way the night tastes, one at a time, not early nor late. My mother told me that I was not afraid of the dark, and when I looked it was true. How did she know so long ago? With her father dead almost before she could remember, and her mother following him not long after, and then her grandmother who had brought her up, and a little later her only brother, and then her firstborn, gone as soon as he was born. She knew. This poem echoes, and it's one of several elegiac poems. It echoes one that Naomi read of Lucille Clifton's, that I didn't even know was there in the new book of Lucille's. And I don't know how Lucille knew all the things she has in that poem either. By Dark. When it is time, I follow the black dog into the darkness that is the mind of day. I can see nothing there but the black dog, the dog I know going ahead of me, not looking back, Oh, it is the black dog I trust now in my turn after the years when I had all the trust of the black dog. Through an age of brightness and through shadow, on into the blindness of the black dog, where the rooms of the dark were already known, and had no fear in them for the black dog, leading me carefully up the blind stairs. Good night. Sleep softly, my old love, my beauty in the dark. Night is a dream we have, as you know, as you know. Night is a dream you know, an old love in the dark around you as you go, without end, as you know. In the night where you go, sleep softly, my old love, without end in the dark, in the love that you know. At the bend, I look for you, my curl of sleep, my breathing wave on the night shore, my star in the fog of morning. I think you can always find me. I call to you under my breath. I whisper to you through the hours all your names, my ear of shadow. I think you can always hear me. I wait for you, my promised day, my time again, my homecoming, my being where you wait for me. I think always of you waiting. I don't normally read a translation in a reading. I'm reading this one it's a tiny one, a very tiny poem, because it came out of the same period when I was writing those other poems and others that go with them. And sometimes people say, well, how do you do a translation? Where does it come from? How do you know it? You could do it. And it's a very hard question to answer, just as it is with poems. I mean, you can't say where a poem comes from. I can't. I mean, I know that it comes out of what I don't know, but this is a poem that I'd known, a little Latin poem that I'd known since I was 18, I think. Probably a poem. It's a poem that probably you all know. It's a poem ascribed to the Emperor Hadrian. It's a 6-line poem, and it's addressed supposedly to his own soul, but who knows who it's addressed to. And all of a sudden, as I was working on doing these other poems, I thought, that's the way I would like that poem to happen in English. That's the way I would like to have that poem in English. After all the years that I'd known it, and I'd read, I think, all the translations I'd ever found in English and French and Spanish, and then I heard this one quite different. So how it happened, I don't know, but I know it doesn't necessarily happen overnight. You know, it can take a long time. Little soul. Little soul, little stray, little drifter, now where will you stay, all pale and all alone, after the way you used to make fun of things? The Nomad Flute. You that sang to me once, sing to me now. Let me hear your long lifted note. Survive with me. The star is fading. I can think farther than that, but I forget. Do you hear me? Do you still hear me? Does your air remember you, O breath of morning, night song, morning song? I have with me all that I do not know. I have lost none of it. But I know better now than to ask you where you learned that music, where any of it came from. Once there were lions in China. I will listen until the flute stops and the light is old again. Just this. When I think of the patience I have had, back in the dark before I remember or knew it was night, until the light came all at once at the speed it was born to, with all the time in the world to fly through, not concerned about ever arriving, and then the gathering of the first stars, unhurried in their flowering spaces, and far into the story the planets cooling slowly in the ages of rain, then the seas starting to bear memory, the gaze of the first cell at its waking. How did this haste begin? This little time at any time? This reading by lightning, scarcely a word? This nothing? This heaven? Finally, another bird poem called The Laughing Thrush. Oh, forever nameless joy of the morning, voice tumbling upward note by note out of the night, from the hush of the dark, ageless valley, out of what never has not been there, song unquestioning and unbounded, yes. Yes, this is the place. This is the one time in the whole of before and after, with all of memory waking into it now, with the lost visages that hover around the edge of sleep and return, constant and clear as nothing except themselves, and the words that lately have fallen silent to surface among the phrases of some future, if there is a future. And all the luminous days that we look back to see and can see only the single immeasurable landscape of long clouds. Here is where they all sing the first daylight, whether or not there is anyone listening. Thank you.